What's up, guys? It's here coming with another retro deck profile. Today I thought it'd be fun to look at my Perfect Circle deck for the September 2007 format. This is the format right after 2007 Nationals, and you had the big machine beat, and Raiza was released that format, which really impacted it. This deck was a deck in the format before, but it is best known, September 2007 is best known as the Perfect Circle format. This was the best deck of the format, even though it was a deck in the previous format. It did lose a copy of Malicious, but outside of that, the deck still is really good, because a lot of the other things that really made that format big went, were either banned or went to one. We lost our 2 copies of Trap Dustshoot, which was the big thing in that format. Brain Control also went down to 1. This kind of became the best deck with the neutering of those hits. I really do enjoy this deck. I really enjoy this mirror. I think this is a really underrated format. We do play it right after the release of D-Prison, which would be January 2008. So cards that came out in the middle of the format, like D-Prison and Lad, are typically included, but obviously Phantom Darkness, which came out in February, which gave us Dark Armed and Allure and all those things. For the Dad Return format, which is a format I typically stay away from. That was not included in the format, even though it technically was released at the end of this format. We play without it because that, again, it's just an entirely different format going into the next, going into February with Phantom Darkness. So to start it off, we have our 1 copy of Stratos. This is our searcher for all of our Destiny Hero monsters and our big Destiny Hero engine. Which includes 2 copies of Malicious. Like I said, this went to 2, from 1 to 2. It was originally at 3 at the last format, and then we went down to 2, so we only play the 2 copies. 2 copies of Fearmonger. This card allows you to special summon a Destiny Hero monster from your graveyard once you start a battle in the next standby phase, and typically we are summoning our copy of Disc Commander, which draws 2 cards whenever it is summoned or special summon. So we run a lot of ways to revive that in order to draw cards, and this is the best way to do this. You want to kind of get your Disc Commander in your graveyard pretty early with something like Destiny Draw, and then go right into that, and then you can revive it with like Premature, or Call the Hunter, or Fearmonger, and then you tribute it off for one of our 3 copies of Raiza. Big fan of Raiza in this deck. Card is really good. It is the best tribute monster that we play. You play the 3 copies. This is very, very standard, and its card is awesome. The fact that you're able to make your opponent top deck. There are a lot of times, I know in a lot of formats and a lot of matchups that like just bringing back Treeborn Frog just to be like a chump blocker is like a thing, but in this matchup you have to be like, oh, if I draw my Treeborn Frog and I'm locked out of my next draw phase because I'm drawing a dead Treeborn, which I don't want, how do you play around that? So this mirror is really interesting for the cards that you have to play around, and that's why another reason I enjoy it a lot. We also play 1 copy of Zaborg. A lot of lists played 2 copies of this or 2 copies of Light and Darkness Dragon. I've elected to go 1 and 1. I still like Zaborg has some validity in the format. It is a really good card to pop like Recruiters and Floaters. This deck does have a really hard time getting rid of cards like Spirit Reaper and Marshmallon. Those cards are really good in this. Again, those cards would typically be side deck cards, especially Marshmallon, because it's really good against this deck, and it's not so great against a lot of other decks in the format, because they typically have ways to deal with, especially the Warrior deck, with like Double Exile. But I feel like, I don't know, it's just really, those 2 cards are just really good, and I really enjoy the Zaborg for the ability to get rid of those cards on the board. Our side deck is typically designed to not beat the mirror. We kind of built our main deck for the mirror. It's one of those things where if a deck has a best deck, you kind of tech it out to play against the best deck, and then you side either way. Zaborg is also really good against a common thing here in the format, which is 2 Mystic Tomatoes. We do play a whole tomato box here. So I was originally playing Cyber Dragons, and I went with the Tomatoes. I felt like Tomato was better than Cyber Dragon because of the utility that you can get out of it. You were able to get other things, and there's no Chimera tech. You can contact like other Cyber Dragons or anything like that. That's not in the format, so we don't have to worry about that. So I feel like Tomato is just the better option because it gets you into your one of Snipe Hunter. Snipe Hunter is a great just removal card. We have chosen to play without Crush card, which makes this card better because this is a card that typically just gets dunked on by a Crush card. That's why I've cut it from my Teledad decks, because that it's not a prize card there, but Crush card we've elected to not play it. So Snipe Hunter is just a great card to include in the deck for generic removal. The rest of the cards in the tomato box, we have the 1 Sangan. It searches a lot of the deck. And then, of course, the 1 of Spirit Reaper. This is, again, a great way to stall out when your opponent doesn't have Zaborg. For me, I like, again, the 2-1. I think 2 Lad is just too much because it really inhibits. If your opponent has a Treeborn Frog in their graveyard, this card is dead because Treeborn Frog will cause the infinite negates. On the other hand, though, when it is your Lad and you want to slow the game down, you can drop this card, and then when you're ready, you feel like you've negated. Say your opponent's used 3 of the negates, and they're going to just run it over next turn. You can force the Treeborn Frog, force the 4th negate, and then just start playing from there if you're able to win the game. And then we're going along with the Spirit Reaper. We have our 1 copy of Marshmallon that had been released early in the format. This card is awesome. It's great tribute fodder. It doesn't lose to enemy controller, which is a pretty popular card in the format, unlike Spirit Reaper. 1 copy of Treeborn Frog to just keep, again, bringing it back in for our 4 Monarchs or our Light and Darkness Dragon. Great tribute fodder. And then the recently unbanned Breaker, the Magical Warrior. Again, good backward removal in a format where MST is at 1. And I've elected to main deck 1 copy of DD Crow. I really like this card against zombies. Obviously, the card of Safe Return zombie deck is really good, but it is also really good in the mirror to hit your opponent's Treeborn Frog or to hit your opponent's Malicious before they activate the effect. You just do it in standby phase, and then you don't have to worry about, if they're out as a Monarch of their own. It's really good. So that'll do it for the monster lineup here. And we can move on to the spells. We have a full 3 copies of Destiny Draw. Again, we have a lot of our D-Hero monsters. We can get to them with Stratos. So this card is pretty live. It's a great way to get our Malleus and Disc Commanders in the graveyard. Pretty standard card to play at 3. 1 copy of Soul Exchange. This is a tech card that I personally like. My buddy Chris turned me on to this. It's a great way to deal with set monsters. If there's set spies in the format or set tomatoes or any of the floaters or the recruiter monsters. This is a great way to get rid of those and not trigger them. 2 copies of Rhoda because we have plenty of warriors that we can go get. We can obviously search for Stratos, but you can directly go for Fearmonger if you feel necessary. 1 copy of Pot of Avarice to put everything back. I believe this card is at 2 copies in the format, but I just don't think it's that good at 2 in this deck. It doesn't do too much for you. 1 copy of Enemy Controller. This card is really good with our Treeborn Frog, of course, but there are just a lot of different utilities. Enemy Controller was a really slept-on spell for a while, and this card is really good. 1 copy of Brain Control, again, limited from the March, 3 copies. It's a great way for, Brain for Game is a thing, but you Brain Control, take, and then that's an easy way to get Lad out with Treeborn Frog and things like that. 1 copy of Lightning Vortex. This is pretty good staple removal in a format without Dark Hole. I like it. I know a lot of lists don't care to play it, but I do like this card in the deck. 1 copy of Premature Burial. This card is really good with Disc Commander, of course, but there are a lot of ways you could just bring this back, grab a Sangan, tribute it off, go search. 1 copy of Foolish Burial to get all of our monsters in our graveyard. We can get our Treeborn Frog, our Mally, depending on what we need, and go from there. And then, of course, the 1 Heavy and the 1 Mystical Space Typhoon, which are, of course, both limited to round out the spell lineup. And on to the traps here. We have 1 copy of Trap Dustshoot. Typically, this is the card that is Crush Card Virus in the trap lineup. The trap lineup is pretty standard. It is the staple 6. You'll see a lot of lists that play Crush Card. We just don't like playing Crush Card in our formats, just old formats. We just prefer to play without prize cards. I know the Edison community plays with Dark End Dragon, which is something I also don't agree with, but I don't really care to play with prize cards. So I think there's a lot of creativity in playing without it, so I've elected to play a copy of Trap Dustshoot, even though it is at 1. 1 copy of Call of the Haunted. Again, bring back our Disc Commander. This is a great way to do it. If they try and hit this card, chain it, grab Sangan, and go search. 2 copies of Wing Blast. This is one of the first formats where Wing Blast really took off as a card. I really like Wing Blast as a card. I think it's a really good trap. It's a really underrated trap. 1 copy of Torrential Tribute and 1 copy of Mirror Force to round out the trap lineup. And I am going to show you my side deck here. So I'm going to kind of plop down some decks that you can expect to play against outside of the mirror. We have our Gadget deck. That's like a weird anti-meta Gadget deck that I love playing in this format that doesn't play... there's no Machinas out at the time, but it plays copies of Hydra Giddon. It plays copies of Banisher or the Radiance, and it plays a lot of 1-for-1 removal spells. Despite Smashing Ground and Fissure being limited, you can play cards like Hammer Shot and Vortex and things like that. The Gadgets actually were at 2 in this format. They put it at 2 for some reason. 9 Gadget lists weren't too rampant in March 07, so it's kind of interesting. You can, of course, play against Warriors. I love Anti-Meta Warrior. It's a really cool deck. It's a really fun, really stun deck. You could play like 3 Solemn Judgments if you want to go that route, which is a lot of fun. There is the DDT deck that Chris Perovic popularized. It's better in March, but you can definitely still play it in September. And then, of course, the Bolito zombies that run like Illblood and Card of Safe Return and things like that. This is kind of your typical matchups that you would be playing against that aren't the mirror match. So in terms of my side deck, I have decided to include 3 copies of Kinetic Soldier. This card is really good against the Warrior matchup, of course. They have a really difficult time dealing with this card. If you just set it, it's just a huge wall. For the mirror, I've included a second copy of DD Crow. I typically don't side too much for the mirror, but 1 Crow's still pretty good. Some tribute monsters that I like. I like 2 Mobius. The reason I like this card, again, to get rid of like Card of Safe Return and stuff like that in the zombie matchup, but it's not just for that card in the zombie matchup. It's also to hit Rivalry of the Warlords. When you look back at this format in terms of optimization of it, Rivalry is a card that Warrior and zombies are going to side. It just also happens to be really good that Warrior plays a ton of trap cards, so this card is good regardless. And then zombies have that Card of Safe Return, so they're always going to have something face up that you can hit with this Mobius. But because of the rivalry, Aqua, the Treeborn Frog is also an Aqua, so you can bring back Treeborn Frog and you contribute this under Rivalry of Warlords, which is really good. So that's kind of a big thing that you want to be able to hit. In later formats, you could also do the same play with Gozen Match, because, again, Treeborn Frog is Aqua Water, Mobius is Aqua Water. It's a really good way to eliminate those floodgates so that you're allowed to play, because you do play a lot of different... Again, you know, you want to be able to tribute for Raiza, and you can't do that because it's like a wing beast. It's really interesting. I also play 1 copy of Jinzo for like burn matchups and things like that, as well as heavy trap decks. And if I need to side in more of these tribute monsters than I like, I side deck. The only spell I side is a second copy of Soul Exchange, just to make these tribute monsters more live. Lad is really good against zombies, so if I really need to resolve that, getting that card on the board, I will play a copy of Soul Exchange. For trap cards, you play 2 copies of Widespread Ruin. This card's okay against Warrior, but it's really good against zombies because all their monsters are smaller than Illblood. Illblood is 19, so a lot of times they'll be trying to attack with everything but the Illblood, because when the Illblood is destroyed, everything that it summoned is destroyed with it. So if they choose not to attack with it, you can use this when they declare an attack to get rid of the Illblood, which I really like about Widespread Ruin. So that's the reason we play Widespread Ruin in the side deck, mostly just to hit Illblood. 3 copies of Pulling the Rug. It's actually really funny that Gadgets will... I've seen Gadgetless side deck 3 copies of Dark Bribe just to stop this card, because if you stop the cycle in that deck, it is really good. And there are Gadget Monarch decks that will play like 3 copies of Raiza and a couple copies of Thestalos and maybe a Zaborg or 2. And I've seen that list. That was popular in March and September. I've seen that played in both. So 3 copies of Pulling the Rug for those decks. And then for all of, and again, any burn matchups there, you don't play a ton of traps, so playing Royal Decree is not too difficult. So I have elected to side deck 2 copies of Royal Decree. There will be some duels in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe for retro format content, and be sure to let me know what you think of the deck, and thanks for watching, guys.